Welcome to Less Clutter, More You, a podcast that travels with you through the journey of letting go and creating order so you can start making more room for what matters most. Together, we'll go beyond the basket to start unlocking your next level of embracing your physical and mental space through mindset shifts and action steps. I'm your host, Maggie Britton, professional organizer, clutter coach, wife, and mom of four, and I am so glad you are here. Welcome back. Dimple Arora is our guest, and she is a trauma-informed life coach working with teens and moms so that everyone in their home can be in an environment where they are thriving. When you're listening to Dimple, you're going to hear that there's so much that we can unpack from our past that plays a role in our home environments today. And what that looks like in your relationship with your children, with your teenagers. And if there's any parents of teenagers listening to this, hold on, buckle up, because I know it can be hard, but that is where Dimple comes in. This is her language. This is who she works with. And so, Dimple, can you give us a little introduction on how it was the teens and their moms that really sparked your interest and your focus?
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation. Working with teens, I didn't start working with teens in life coaching until a few years ago. And before that, I was working with women who were going through trauma, were affected by childhood adverse experiences, which is what happened to me. Now, I was a high school teacher prior to coaching, and it was because I had gotten sick and I had to leave and resign from my teaching career. After I left teaching, and then I went on a fascinating healing journey for myself, that's when I went in to coaching and nutrition and therapies for helping us with our past, to heal our past. And after a few years of doing that, I realized that wouldn't it be amazing if we had these tools and these techniques to manage our nervous system and our emotions and our mindset when we are young, when we are kids, when we are growing up. So that's when I started to work with kids. And as time went on, my business progressed into working with teens, which is amazing because when I taught high school, I was always working with teens and attracted to working with that age group and that demographic.
And just for reference, too, my daughter has done one of her programs, one of her teenage girl programs, because like you said, having those tools heading into that stage of life is so valuable and something that so many of us don't have in our back pocket. So, Dimple, let's go ahead and let's dive in a little bit into what it was like for you to grow up, your household environment, what made that difficult, and then let's go ahead and look at what that looks like for you today and for all of our listeners who are probably finding so much truth in what you're saying in their own realities.
Absolutely. So growing up, I had a mom with obsessive compulsive disorder and very high functioning anxiety. So our home was always spick and span. Now, as you know, having a clean home is something that we all desire, but when you're growing up in an environment where it becomes stressful and where it causes strained relationships and where it causes lots of anxiety for the kids and the people living in the home, then it's not so beneficial. So when I went away to university, I trained myself to become messy. I actually wanted to get away from this obsessive compulsive disorder and way of organizing. And it's so interesting, Maggie, because I believe with my mom, it was also cultural, and she's from the Caribbean, and they're very clean and organized most of the time. It's a cultural thing because they believe that cleanliness is godliness. So it's not just my mom that was very neat and tidy and always cleaning. It's my aunts, it's other people I've seen in the community that she associates with, other family members in her community. So I noticed that it was also a cultural thing. And to be honest, my siblings have picked up, we all picked up on this perfectionism and this being neat and tidy, because not being neat and tidy meant being punished. And it meant being shamed. And it meant being made to feel guilty. So I made a huge effort when I went to university to live in mess. And then I became very messy to the opposite extreme. And what I noticed is that when there was a lot of clutter around me and when there was a lot of untidiness, it would give me a lot of anxiety. And as we know, research shows that visually, when we see a lot of mess or clutter that can cause overwhelm, it can cause us to be less focused and less productive. So what I started noticing is that when I started cleaning up or tidying up, I was able to study better, or I wasn't able to get to studying until everything was neat and tidy. And so throughout university, I operated this way where I would procrastinate tidying up until I had to finally do it in order to get my studying done, in order for my mental health to be in a better state. And then after that, I realized as I grew up, like after university, I realized how much this had affected my mental health.
And my guess is that growing up in that environment where we're focused on perfectionism and not function, there is a difference of being organized and knowing where things are and letting things go versus that over the top perfectionism. And my guess is that this was probably not a verbal conversation ever at any point. My guess is that it was her actions and your responses to her actions. It were the nonverbal cues, the unspoken expectations. And I mean, you even mentioned that there was punishment, right? So you're putting the pieces together of what's rewarded and why. And that can be really confusing to the point where, like you said, now you've gone and you're trying to figure out how to undo all of that perfectionism, to the point that then there was that full cycle that you had to figure out what was going to work best for you. And I think that that's something that gets lost in translation in the world of organizing and decluttering, because the goal is to make our lives simpler, right? I mean, yes, we want to get the laundry put away, but why is that? That's because it makes our life easier the next day, right? What we do today simplifies tomorrow. But when that is so much the focus and you are wrapping your value around your ability to keep up with those high expectations, then that is exactly what happens. And I also want our listeners to recognize that Dimple referenced that her mom did have OCD. And something that happens way too often is taking that term and throwing it around when it doesn't actually apply, and you're just, oh, my mom's so OCD, but this is a real life situation, right? Because there are people who are struggling, and it is affecting families and their environment. So, Dimple, I know that the teens and the moms that end up finding you, you've mentioned that they actually are high achieving, but also high anxiety individuals. Can you talk about, again, it's that perfectionism piece, right? That I need to perform. I need to have X, Y, and Z results. Can you talk about what that looks like in the relationship of the mom and the teen, and where you might even start with that? I think like when you went off to university, you had to let go of so many expectations and thoughts and beliefs and all these things around how you're supposed to keep your space. When they're coming to you, is that part of the discussion ever about their space and how these high achieving, high anxiety teens, how that environment affects them?
Absolutely. It absolutely affects them. And like you said, Maggie, it's not a verbal conversation. It's something that's never been discussed between the parent and the teen. Usually a parent will come in and say, oh, and by the way, their room is so unorganized and messy, and they don't even have any motivation to declutter or clean up their rooms. Now, the thing is, how our parent responds to us in childhood affects how we respond in our teen years. Now, if a parent is very critical, which usually it's the case sometimes for the families that come to see me, if the parent is very critical, has always expected the child to be a certain way, or wants to change the child to be a certain way, or mold them into somebody that they're not, that teen is going to have a very increased amount of anxiety, right? So they're also going to have a very negative self-image of themselves, because according to the parent, nothing they do is good enough, even though they are so high functioning and so high achieving. They are athletes. They are doing well in school. They're trying their best at everything they do. Their schedules are packed with extracurricular activities. They don't even have as much downtime sometimes. But what happens is those kids are physically and mentally exhausted from always having to perform. And with that physical and mental exhaustion comes a nervous system dysregulation. So their nervous system is always on alert and actually giving off a lot of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And they have a lot of feelings of shame and guilt because it's related to what they're not getting done, or, maybe they're doing too much. And from the parent's point of view, sometimes the parent recognizes that the teen is doing too much and needs help and has become a perfectionist. What the parent does not recognize is usually how that came to be. And it was over years and years and years of possibly having an innate behavior, possibly in their personality, having it modeled to them as a child, maybe being extra critical on the child or expecting too much of them. So however that nervous system dysregulation came to be, usually the parent or the teen is not aware of that. And what happens is sometimes it even causes a social impairment for the child or for the parent, because what happens is it's affected their functioning in the home, and then it affects the relationship of the family members, and then also affects relationships with people outside of the home, such as maybe even friends, but also teachers. Can also affect relationships with teachers, with authority, with anybody that's trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do, or maybe it increases resistance towards completing tasks or having a job or working with an employer. So there's so many layers and effects that it can have. And so the high functioning teens really are trying their best, but they are struggling with how to manage it all. And their body has become physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted.
Oh, I am living that right now. And I am having the same conversation. Everything that you're saying are the conversations that my friends, the parents of teens, are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you try to find that balance between trying to keep your space and your home organized and functioning without burning them out. And that, I mean, it's hard. What you were saying is that starts so many years prior to the teenage years. So if you're listening, you have teens and you have younger ones, or you have the younger ones, pay attention, because what you're doing today is going to show up one way or another, for the good, for the bad, for the whatever it might be. It's sticking around for a while. So I hear everything you're saying, and I can relate to that in my own home and with friends and with clients, because one of the main questions people come to me is, how do I get my kid on board? Why don't they care about their space like I do, and all of these things? But you have to remember that there is so much going on in their life that they're processing, that they don't even know how to verbalize what they're feeling, and all of those stressors that they don't recognize is adding up. So thank you for sharing that. I can totally relate to that as well.
Absolutely. And you have 4 kids. And I just want to add something there. Their brain is going through a lot of change. And their amygdala, which actually governs their fight or flight response, is constantly firing. And they have so much coming at them visually, mentally, emotionally, and even with social media and information overload that's happening to them. And when their brain is actually wired in a way at that time to actually be more anxious than usual, it's a lot for them to take in. And that's why it's important for them to learn the tools and techniques to manage their stress and their emotions.
I mean, talking about decluttering, a digital declutter in a teen's life, I mean, if you can take what you're applying to your physical space in your home and also start to apply that in your teens world, I mean, the difference, even if it's just that 1% improvement on the next day, because I know that you are working so much around mental health. And yes, our spaces and what's in it certainly might not help, or it is helping either way, however it's set up. But in addition, you have that digital clutter, which then is leading to that emotional clutter, the mental clutter. And then that's when they're finding you, right? So all of these pieces are adding up.
Yeah.
My guess is they're reaching a tipping point when they get to you.
Absolutely. And that digital declutter that you're talking about, it's actually so important, because what's happening is they're actually losing their sleep. So a lot of the teens, they're starting to connect with their friends at 10 p.m. when they should be going to sleep. And I understand that the social media and the apps are the way that they're connecting with their friends online, but their times are just very off, right? And to be honest, there is a correlation with clutter in the bedroom, as you must know, and poor sleep quality, and also their melatonin production that starts at a certain time. And, it's being affected by being on their devices at night. So they're actually also not getting the proper sleep. So because they're not sleeping properly, how could they even have the motivation to do what they need to do the next day, let alone clean up a mess? Like, you'll know where they've been because they've just left a trail behind them. So as you teach, Maggie, everything needs a home. Everything needs a home and everything needs a system and a routine. And that's what these teens need, is a system and a routine to be able to manage their life. And I love how you use the word simplify, because whatever we can do to help them simplify their life, maybe it's not using all the apps. Maybe it's decluttering some of the apps, getting them to agree to turn off the internet at a certain time of night so that they're not staying up, and getting everything systemized that way with little small tasks that can help not only them, but help the entire family. Because us as adults are just as guilty for staying up and scrolling at night. So just different methods to help simplify the routine for the entire family can really help.
So important. So what would you say to a mom of a teen right now that her level of anxiety is matching that of her teen, and what she can do to, as you say, help create an environment so that everyone in their home can thrive? What is one thing that a mom that's listening right now can do to bring that into their home?
Okay. So we always start with the nervous system. So just breathing, learning how to breathe on a daily basis is so important. And that puts the body into a relaxed state. So practicing mindful breathing a few times throughout the day is one thing that can start to train that person's body to be more calm and relaxed. When we are in a parasympathetic nervous system state, meaning we are more relaxed rather than stressed, that's when we are able to digest our food. That's when we feel safety in the body. That's when we are able to connect with others and be social. So a lot of parents want to connect with their teen, but they are so stressed that their nervous system does not allow them to be in a safe space for connection, which is amazing because that's what parents of teens want the most, is to connect with their teen. And their teen is biologically wired at that age to actually separate from the parents, which is amazing because we don't want a teen heading into their 20s saying, I really want to stay with mama, or I really want to sleep with mama tonight, right? So we need that brain development to happen so that the teen is able to form that separation, go into adulthood in a healthy way. But just learning how to breathe and teaching your teen how to breathe is so important. And I actually have an acronym that I use with my clients, and I call it FEED. And this is an acronym that I use to optimize mental, emotional, and physical health. So I say FEED. So F is we're fueling the brain. E is we are expanding the heart. Now, expanding the heart involves dealing with unprocessed emotions, which is what a lot of teens come to me with. Then the next E is energize the gut. So we're working on gut health, digestion, to take stress off the body and to make sure that we're optimizing our physical health, because it's amazing. A lot of the teens that come to me don't realize that their happy hormones, such as serotonin, is produced in the gut. So when you optimize gut health, you're optimizing neurotransmitters like serotonin, which is the happy hormone. And the last letter is D, which is daily habits. As you teach, daily habits to keep everything systematized and organized. And that is the process that we're going to follow to optimize mental, emotional, and physical health.
That's incredible. And I'm so glad that you picked teens, that you're focused, not that you picked teens,
Yeah.
teens probably picked you in a way, because I feel that it's just an age group that tends to get left behind because there's so much focus on that preschool age and the elementary age that it's almost like you get to the teenage, you're thinking that everything's all set up. But any fellow teen parent realizes you are just getting started. And it is for the mom and for the child. I think that feed process can work for both.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working, is the mom and the teen ever in the room at the same time, or are they working individually and then coming together?
So a lot of times I see the teen individually and then I see the mom individually, but sometimes sessions start off where they're together. And then the mom will take off. I'll do the session. She'll come back and pick up her teen. But I always involve my process with, it's a collaborative effort because the whole point is to connect the parent and the teen and to make sure that connection is being fostered. So when we talk about fueling the brain, expanding the heart and energizing the gut and then doing daily habits, it's really, we're forming a connection, brain, heart, gut, which is going to help to regulate the nervous system. And they're connected through a long wandering nerve called the vagus nerve. So we're actually toning the vagus nerve, which helps to relax the body and relax the nervous system, which can then lead them to feeling more calm, more confident, more courageous to do the things they need to do, and ultimately more in control of their life. So yes, we're working with the body and the mind to form the connection, but ultimately it's to form the connection between the parent and the teen.
Oh, and connection is something we are all certainly striving for. So everybody definitely go rewind to that point, write it down, and see if the next time you're struggling and the question is, how do I get my teen to do this or be this or follow through on that? Go back to that feed process and prioritize the connection, because you may find, like I was saying, like, yes, my one child, I do have to sit in there with them while the room is maybe getting reset. But by taking that breath and going through that process, there's connection in it. So maybe the laundry is your connection that you've been missing the whole time. And that's your key point where you guys can actually have that conversation. And for anyone who is reaching out to get help with you, Dimple, with anybody, by starting to talk about your feelings or the lack of connection or the desire for the connection, that is something that I cannot encourage enough. And I encourage my clients or anybody who's always listening is to have that conversation. Going back to your mom, if she was ever able to take a step back and say, these are the reasons, this is why I feel better in this space. This is why I'm asking for your help in this situation. Just by starting to have that conversation as to why you're asking in the first place and talking about those benefits is really a step forward into the right place and reaching that connection. Because when you don't have any context and it's just words coming at you, there's no other option but to shut it down and close it out. So yeah, I think connection is that key point.
Absolutely. When it's just a instruction and there's no context around it, it's just a demand. Why would anybody want to do that without understanding the context? So in order to get our teens to cooperate, we need to connect. And I do love what you said of being in the room with the teen when they're completing something like maybe cleaning the room. That's co-regulation. We had to co-regulate them when they were babies. We are still co-regulating them when they are teens. And it's so important. In order to co-regulate someone, we need to be regulated ourselves. So even when you're going out to work with somebody at their home, it's because somebody needs that support and that hand holding, and you're co-regulating. Even as adults, we need support. We need our girlfriends. We call up a friend when we're feeling down, right? We also need that. So our teens and our kids need that more than ever. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to connect through cleaning up, because I have the same issue with my daughter. She wants to put all her clothes on her bed, but then it's overwhelming for her to do it by herself. So she asks me, can you help me? Can you do it with me? And sometimes I think, oh, she wants me to do most of it because she's right. She's just going to sit there while I do it. But no, we do it together and it becomes a really great way to connect.
Well, good. So if our listeners have gotten anything out of this, it is to connect over the laundry, right? Let's all go this week. Let's go into the room and let's put laundry away and find an opportunity to connect over the clean and the dirty clothes. So thank you, Dimple. There is so much we could dive into. You've already talked about how you have let go of a lot of those expectations that were set out for you as a child. But what is something in your present world that you have been able to let go of physically? Like I like to ask this of my guests. It could have been something, I know you moved recently, so maybe that was just letting something go on that move, or maybe it was something bigger than that. But is there anything in your current life that you recently were able to let go of?
Yes. This is a huge one, actually. So my daughter is 11. I wanted a second child for the longest time, and it did not work out. So when we were moving, I realized I still held on to my daughter's baby stuff because I anticipated that I was going to have a second child. And now we've been in this new home for 2 years, and I have finally come to terms with the idea of letting go of her baby stuff. And, it's interesting. I never let go of the baby stuff, but in retrospect, when I wanted that second child, I should have actually started to let go of that baby stuff earlier, because it makes space for new to come in to our current world. So I held on, and it was all girl baby stuff. Possibly if I would have let go, I could have created a space for something new to be birthed into our life, but I didn't do that. So now I have come to terms with letting go of that baby stuff. And you know what, Megs? It feels so good, and the timing feels right, and I'm very happy to do it.
Well, that's a hard one, but I am excited to see what that space allows more of something else to come in, because that is just how it goes. It does. Like, you make this space and then you have the room to invite something that you may not even know was meant for you. And it just finds its way in because there is room to be there. So thank you for sharing that, Dimple. And if you want to find Dimple, she does work virtually as well as in person. So I will put her information in the show notes so that you can find her. Dimple has a podcast, I Am Mom, that even if it's not a recent episode, go back into those, because there's just so much goodness for the moms who are looking for connection. But look for Dimple, follow her, Mindful Evolution, and everything will be listed below in the show notes. So thank you, Dimple, for being here. And I look forward for future conversations of how we can connect with our teens, whether that is over laundry or in a conversation. So thank you, Dimple.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And I am going to launch season 3 of my podcast very shortly, and it is going to be more focused on parents and teens.
That's incredible. That's a gift to so many. Thank you, Dimple.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for tuning in. If after listening you have gained just a boost of motivation to start thinking about your clutter and taking action to clear it, then I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode and leave a rating and review so we can continue to grow and inspire others just like you. In the meantime, I'll be here cheering you on your next step forward with living with less clutter and more you.